okay? Really good wages, benefit packages, the whole 9 yards, trying to do something about healthcare, protecting us and doing something about the border. I'll set the conditions for you to thrive, okay? Because I'm not interested in running your life. None of those 22 people on the Democrat stage could actually say that. Elizabeth Warren wants to run your life. Her, Harris, Biden, all of them. They think, as conservatives have said for a long time, Rush Limbaugh has said for a long time, they think you're too inept to control and manage your own life and the life of your families. That's why they're going to lose again. Because Trump's going to say, let's make America even greater. And they're going to continue to say, America sucks, give us all the power. And he's going to win again.
And I think that's a very good segue into our next story. By the way, you're with the Frontline with Joe and Joe every Sunday night at 8 o'clock. We're streaming live. On Facebook, shout out to Jonathan Ross at HolyFaith Media. Little thank you for everything you've done for us. You've really given us a great boost. You could also see us on HolyFaith Media. Good segue into what we were talking about, because personally I think the two candidates that we're going to basically rise to the top in this 22-person field in the DNC for 2020, I think, this is my opinion, it's either going to be Elizabeth Warren or Kamala Harris. I think it's one or the other. And recently they were at the, there was a festival held by Essence Magazine. This took place very recently. It's a monthly magazine for African-American women. And of course they're pandering for the vote. Just to throw a little sidebar, and I don't want to get on a tangent because I want to talk about what they discussed, because I think it's important that you know about it. Right now, 35% of African Americans are supporting Donald Trump. That's what I read this week.
Really?
35%.
Quaking in their boots now over the Democratic Party.
Obviously, they're pandering to this vote. They go to this festival. And this was the theme of what they were talking about. Basically, the gist of what both of them were discussing was they were announcing plans to redistribute private wealth according to race. So I want to lay out what they discussed one by one, first Harris, then Warren, and we're going to have a little discussion. And if you're, want to chime in, please feel free.
Is this going to upset me?
Oh, most likely.
All right, good. Let's rock and roll.
Harris,
rock and roll.
Harris laid out a plan which revolved around pledging $100 billion. Now, this is a plan, but this is the numbers that she talked about. $100 billion for grants to support Black families and families of color, which would include probably Hispanics, to secure homes in communities where financial institutions have historically not provided mortgages for these people. Now, I work in a financial institution, a bank. We just went through one of the worst recessions, if not the second worst financial situation in the history of our country, based on the fact we were giving people mortgages that they could not afford. So this is her plan, and I want to discuss it because I do know a little bit about this because I work in banking. She wants to, I'm going to break down that $100 billion for you, what it means to each person.
I think this is the part where I'm going to need some
She wants to cover your down payment and your closing costs. Basically, that $100 billion breaks down to about $25,000 per family. Now, I own a home in Southern Bergen County, New Jersey. It's not a very big home. It's a cape. It's a normal home, very modest home. Even if I was to put $25,000, because this would be closing costs, and that's nothing. So if you ask me, she's setting you up to fail, because I'm going to tell you, I'm a homeowner. That's the smallest part of owning a home, is putting the down payment. You have to make your payments every month.
Right.
And there are costs that come with the house, and they don't come in hundreds. Your hot water heater goes, it's $1,100. You have water in the basement. You got to get a French drain. It's $2,100.
Right.
The wall collapses outside your house. Count on one thing a year happening. Joe Campo, who's on our show recently, he runs, what's it called? I don't mean to embarrass you, Joe, but he runs, well, I'm not embarrassing you. You're a great person. He runs a home for kids in Brooklyn. They had to put a roof on the house.
Costs money.
$8,000.
Right.
So when you own a home, you own all the issues. Not like when you have, an apartment, you call the super.
Right.
So she's basically saying, I'm going to drop $25,000 to these families. You're setting them up to fail.
Right.
There's a reason why certain families, like me, for instance, I'd like to buy a house on Park Avenue in New York City. I can't afford it.
You don't have $8 million laying around.
So I live in Southern Bergen County. The point is, $25,000 you're not really helping somebody. Also, let me go on.
No, I want to just chime in there.
Okay, good.
Why can't they turn around if she really wanted to do something for these people? Why don't you? And I'm speaking to Cory Booker too. Okay, let's take the city of Newark. The city of Newark is one of the worst places in the world.
Most violent.
Okay, that's our hometown, and I love the fact that I'm born in Newark, New Jersey. I truly do. Okay, Newark has parts of it that are horrible, that nobody wants to even live there. Okay, you don't blame the banks for not wanting to lend anybody money there because nobody has any real jobs. They don't have any real income. How about Kamala Harris? Whose proposal was this? Harris's?
This is Harris. How
about you spend some money supporting a candidate that's going to end the corruption, the out and out, basic corruption in the city of Newark, and start to bring the industries back that were there, that your party, the Democrat Party, chased out years ago, and get people some good jobs in these businesses so that then they can afford their own damn closing costs, okay? And they can afford all the other things that are required when it comes to home ownership, which is what those people want and what they don't have access to because no businesses want to go there either. You want to know why, Miss Harris? Because of people like you, because of your party and your party's policies who can't stand that a business owner or a corporation that's run by a board of directors actually makes money. That's what they do. That's why they're in business. But that the people that work for those corporations can make a good living there. And then they can afford their own home. They don't need you. But you know what happens then, Senator Harris? Once they're independent and they have good jobs, they don't need you. So let's call it the way it is, as Joe always said. This is a stupid political stunt. I call it stupid because it's so easy to see through. Why you truly don't want to help people. You're just interested in increasing your power base. And as Joe just mentioned, 35% of African Americans that could potentially support Donald Trump, you're really quaking now. You're really shaking now.
Let me go on with some other things she said. She also wanted to change how credit scores were calculated, as well as the debt to income ratios, which also contribute to giving someone a mortgage. That's exactly what created our mortgage crisis. Not necessarily credit scores and debt to income ratios, but giving people mortgages that, frankly, they should not have had. Listen, owning a home, I own a home. It's expensive. And even a modest home. I have it because I have kids, and frankly, it's good for my kids. If I didn't have kids, I wouldn't live in a home. Frankly, I'd live in an apartment or I'd buy a townhouse. Frankly, this is me. People set it up, it's the American dream. Well, you know something? It costs money. And listen, if you can't afford it, you shouldn't have it. Whether you're black, you're white, you're Asian, you're Hispanic, you're Jewish, you're Catholic.
But Joe, it's going to end in disaster anyway.
Well,
look at the
that's exactly what she's doing.
You know, one of the things, I forgot what commentator it was. This was a while back, okay, that reparations, the form that reparations took, because now we're hearing all about that, okay? And that's really what this is all about, okay? That Bill Clinton, shifty Bill Clinton, okay, part of this, we're going to increase home ownership for African Americans, and it's going to be great. And they did. A lot of black people owned homes. The problem is that they couldn't afford those homes, and that's what happened. And then the government and the banks got together, and they allowed the banks to bundle all those mortgages that they knew people were not going to be able to repay.
Toxic.
Okay, it was toxic. They sold them to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Okay, all the banks bought them, collateralized mortgage obligations. Okay, and everybody knew that they were terrible. They were insured by AIG. Okay. And bottom line is, they wound up borrowing $1 trillion in our name to bail out those same banks for making that boneheaded decision. It ends also in disaster, not just for, in this case, the economy, the overall, and creating this crisis, okay, which they created, all right, along with the banks. Nobody's saying the banks obviously went along with this. But what about all those people who were then dispossessed? In other words, they had their homes taken away from them. In other words, where did they go? What did you give them? In other words, that was so great because they were able to say, well, I own a home. It's a home you can't afford to pay for.
Well, that's whether you're white, black, whatever. I mean,
right? How many of you listen? There's a lot of white people that got probably more.
So
the point is that it turned out it was a disastrous consequence for those people that they say they intended to help.
And she's basically doing the same thing. Now I'm going to get a little controversial.
Please do.
Okay. What keeps people out of poverty in America? I'm going to tell you 3 things that keep. A lot of times poverty is driven, they say it's driven by race. It actually isn't. I'm going to give you the 3 things that actually keep people out of poverty in America. And why I'm bringing this up is if you're not in a situation where you're below the poverty line, odds on you may be able to own something because you know you're making it happen. Okay. 1, you have a high school education. 2, you work. And 3, you're involved in a committed marriage. Why do I say that? Because 3 out of 10 African-American men are not in the home. No, 3 out of 10 African-American men are in the home. 5 out of 10 white men are in the home. The family is being broken down. If families stay together, they're committed to one another, they work hard, you own a home. Case in point, my parents didn't go to college. My father was a barber in a one-man barbershop. My mother was a secretary. They owned a home. They're married 50 years. My neighbor is from Warsaw, Poland, works for the city of New York, goes to work every day. Before that, he did construction. Him and his wife both work. They own a home. My other neighbor is from the former Czech Republic. He works in a warehouse. His wife is a bookkeeper. They work crazy hard. They own a home. So they're committed. That's the secret.
Right.
Now, and I laugh where the Warrens, where the Harrises, why don't you go to the Essence Festival and say that? Why don't you say, hey guys, stay faithful to your women. Hey women, stay faithful to your men. How about we stay in a committed marriage?
How's that for a radical idea?
Oh my goodness.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
Right.
There lies the American dream, my friend.
Right. But then here, the thing is, and we spoke about this a couple of shows ago. Okay. A buddy of mine, I went out to breakfast with him a few months ago, and he said, "Why?" I think many of you might remember I brought this up. He said to me, just he goes, "Why is it that our grandparents could have 7, 8 kids? They forget about high school education. Forget about a high school education. Okay. My grandparents came here as babies off the boat from Italy. Okay. They had no education. My mother is a direct immigrant from Italy. Okay, and she had no education. She got to about what was in Italy was the equivalent of the 3rd grade. Joe makes a very good point. What was the key to success? Not just to having a family, a big family. Okay, committed relationship and work. And I will also throw in belief in God. I know that.
It's funny you say that. I wasn't going to go there, but I'm glad you did. So I'm going to say it. God keeps you committed to each other. You see, that's where the Judeo-Christian ethic, particularly in our case, because we're Catholic, keeps you together. God keeps you together. When you don't have that, frankly, people start doing their own stupid thing.
Well, let's call it the way
and that's the truth.
That is the truth. And let's face it, we started talking about Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren, okay? Remember, in 2016, this is the party that went out of their way to take the name of God and the state of Israel out of their platform.
And it's not just...
And who booed real quick? And who booed Cardinal Dolan as he took the stage to do the prayer to open up the conference. They booed him. They wanted him off the stage. So, yes, mentioning God is important because the left and the Democratic Party have told you, forget about God.
And
there is no God.
I'm going to give you a statistic. Half of the marriages in America are falling apart. It actually is probably more than half.
I think it's like 56%.
Okay. This is not dogma. This is statistics. Families that go to a church, it just says a church, that number gets cut to 25% from divorces. So the adage is the family that stays together prays together.
Prays together, stays together.
Also, I'm going to drop another bomb at you. 3% divorce rate. Families that practice natural family planning.
3%.
3% are divorced. 97% success rate. So this is not dogma. This is divorce statistics.
Right.
So what I'm saying is this, and why I bring it up. Why isn't Kamala Harris saying that at that festival? Why aren't every politician, basically both Democrat and Republican, boostering family life?
Because at the end of the day, we've spoken about this before, we have to look to the larger issue involved. Why is the family attack? What do the Democrats want? And why is it necessary for them, if they're not directly attacking traditional family, husband, wife, kids, okay, and work, like you said, and God, yes. If they're not directly attacking it, they're certainly not doing anything to support it. Why? Because we said it earlier, and we'll say it over and over. This is one of those messages Joe and Joe will say over and over again, the way the left talks about, preaches their lies over and over again. We're going to say the truth over and over and over again. An intact family, okay, that is committed with children, believes in God, and works, has no need for Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, the Democrat Party, and any of their socialist policies. All they want from the government is get the hell out of their life, not to encroach in their life. That's the difference. That's why they can't do it, because they want power for power's sake, and they don't care who they have to destroy, mainly black people in America that they've destroyed. And there's many black commentators out there who are no longer in the Democrat Party, okay, who have said, we've been living on a plantation for the last 50, 60 years, and we're out of it. Newark's a plantation, okay? That's what it is. Chicago is a plantation. Los Angeles, South Central Los Angeles, these are all plantations, okay? That's what they are. There is no difference between these urban areas and the plantations of the 19th century, okay? These people, all right, black people, have been made slaves. Unfortunately, their political leaders are their own kind, who have supported the policies of the socialists, who have kept them enslaved. And for what reason? For power. For power. They don't want mortgages for people. They don't want black home ownership. I'm talking about real black home ownership, where people are making their mortgage payments, they're paying down their principal, they're working hard. Because the more you do that, the less you need them. I'll tell you another reason why they don't want that. There's very little black ownership of property in Newark. They want to keep it that way. They want to keep it that way. You want to know why? Because they could, in their mind, they could get all their people of color, that's what they call them, people of color, okay, to not own homes, because they want them to keep voting for the property tax increases of all the people that do own homes in other parts of the state. Take in New Jersey, for example, okay? Because guess what happens if you own a home? You know what's going to happen if you own a home? You're going to start complaining about property taxes. So that same African-American family that they're looking to help, when they own that home and all of a sudden they get the tax bill, and they look and they say, I'm paying what? I live in Newark, and I'm paying $8,000 a year in property tax to live in the Central Ward of Newark. No. We want to do something about property. See, again, we talk about when you take the approach of strengthening the family, living within that structure, working hard, what you become and what the left hates is you become a complainer. I don't want to pay any more taxes to you people. In fact, I want a big tax cut. Okay, I don't want you doing the things that you say that you need to do in the state level and the federal level. We don't want that anymore. You become independent of the party that's trying to make you dependent, which is the Democrat Party. They want to make you dependent on them. That's what Kamala Harris is doing. All this is, like you keep saying, you use the perfect word. It's a stunt. It's all a stunt.
Well, it's just basically pandering. Well, it's just pandering. You're throwing someone a crumb. Believe me, Kamala Harris and her husband have no problem making their mortgage payment.
Right.
They don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
And in fact, they probably own 2 homes, and they're probably both paid for. The point is, $25,000 is a crumb. You still got to make that payment. And when things break, you still got to fix it, and you're not helping that person. You're simply not. You're basically, if anything, you're setting them up to fail. It's a shame. And I want to go to Warren, because she also said some interesting things. She basically talked about federal contracts. So if you want a federal contract, if she becomes president, she's going to make it mandatory that you hire people of color. She did not talk about qualifications. She simply said, I will make it mandatory that you hire people. Now, again, I work in the private sector. Hiring someone, I don't care if they're black, they're white, they're Jewish, they're Catholic, they're agnostic, they're an atheist. You got to be qualified. Now, there are plenty of people who are black, who are Hispanic, who are very qualified. My wife is very qualified to do her job, very qualified, very smart woman. She's educated. The point being is, I think, again, that's throwing someone a crumb. Frankly, it should be based upon your resume. That's number one. Number two, what she talked about is no criminal history will be looked at, and she didn't qualify that. She didn't say nonviolent versus violent. Now, frankly, if I'm a contractor and you were in jail for murdering somebody, I want to know about it. I'm sorry, because I have other employees. I want to know about it. Now, if you stole some piece of candy when you're 6, I don't care.
Right.
But she said no criminal records and also it will be mandatory. That, if you ask me, is a crumb.
And so
You're
it's
throwing people
undoable.
a crumb, and frankly, like I said, hiring people should be based on one thing: your qualifications.
That's right.
Whether you're black, you're white, you're Jewish, you're Catholic. Stop with this nonsense, because frankly, if I'm a contractor, I want the best people that I can work with,
right,
and work for me,
right,
to put out the best product. By the way, that product is for you. That's a road for you. I want it to be the best product. I don't want to be strong-armed into hiring non-qualified people. And I'm not saying people of color are non-qualified, but what it does do is it creates quotas for that individual to fill, whether the people are qualified or not,
right,
for him to get that contract.
Right.
And that's not serving America.
No, it's not, sir. It's not serving. Again, it's the crumb. Look, we talk about their coalitions of power. They have groups. They break everybody into groups. They look at women. They look at black people. They look at, let's say, Hispanic people. They look at homosexuals and lesbians. They look at that community. They look at all these different groups, and they say we need X percentage of that group, X percentage of that group, X percentage of that group. And they look at them all: Catholics, Jews. They look at all these. They say, these are the numbers we need. So let's make sure we pander to each one of those groups so we could get as many of them, or much of a percentage of each group, to vote for us. And it's very calculated, okay? Obama taught this at Harvard, okay? Coalitions of power. That's how union members. Here's the thing. When any of them start to break in a different direction, that's when they start to get nervous, okay? So we mentioned it before. Trump, no matter what his stance towards Israel is, I think it was a brilliant move from a political point of view. Whether or not you agree with it is not why I'm bringing it up. From a political point of view, to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem was brilliant. You know why? Because the Jews want that. And you know what Donald Trump wants? He wants more of the Jewish vote. Okay, he's been pro-life. Okay, from the beginning. Okay, from the beginning of his in his campaign. All right, all the Catholics that voted for Obama. All right, they saw with Obama how he persecuted the Little Sisters of the Poor and how he attempted to persecute the Catholic Church. They reacted against that, and all those reliable Democrat Catholic votes went for Donald Trump. Okay, when they see 35%, potentially 35% of African Americans ready to listen to the people like Jim Brown and others who say, I'm supporting Donald Trump. I don't know what you're going to do, but I'm supporting Donald Trump. They're quaking in their boots. That is a chink in their armor. You know, their armor being this coalition of power. They can't afford for 15% of African Americans to support Donald Trump. Okay, let alone 30 or 35%. But you know what it is? The truth, as far as everything that they've been doing for decades now, the truth is just getting out there more and more and more. And let's face it, all this is Warren saying this and Harris saying this. This is another stab or another form of reparations, because that's the other stunt that they're pulling now. Okay, so they're trying to sell reparations in this form. And by the way, just as an aside, one of the things, when you talk about taking $100 billion and pouring it into the inner city, you know what that's a euphemism for? We need to take care of our union buddies in the teachers' unions. That's all that is. That's all that is political payoffs. That money's not going to get to the young black kid, the young black girl in the inner city, to the classroom, get them better educated, get them better equipped for life. None of that money ever matters, because all it does is it goes into the pockets of all their cronies that have voted for them, all their union buddies that have voted for them. So it's teachers' unions, it's contractors when they do infrastructure. All that money goes in the toilet, okay? So let's get it straight, all right? That money's not getting to the people that you say it's going to get to. That's a payoff for all your political pals. And we've seen through it. That's why we're here and telling the truth at the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, joined as always by Joe Resinello. We're in the breach right now, talking about more of this nonsense that goes on a daily basis. Give out a shout out. I just want to mention that please keep commenting. For some reason, the com box is kind of like acting a little crazy because we can't see them, but we will see them later on. Please don't stop commenting. Talk amongst yourselves. Go ahead, talk amongst yourselves. But what else? What else we got going on?
Okay, our last segment of the evening, which I thought was kind of interesting when I came across it and discussed it with Joe, is basically New York is becoming a destination for abortion tourism. Now, what does that mean? Basically, because of the 26 abortion bans that have been signed this year alone across 12 states, people in other states are coming to New York to get abortions. Now, okay, why should we even talk about it? New York decided to pay for it. New York is basically bankrupt, basically. They allotted for $250,000. And one of the clinics that I want to discuss, because a lot of the traffic is going through it, it's privately owned, which means that the owner, by the way, Merrill Hoffman, is getting rich, is basically involved in this, and he's also establishing different partnerships with organizations that are paying for people to get bused into New York. Basically, this is going on, and we're paying for it. We're paying for it, the taxpayer, and they're deciding. I think we should know about this. This is, once again, the deep state shoving their agenda down your throat. We're not paying our bills. New York is in big financial shape, and this is what they're spending your money on. And I want you to know about it, because a lot of people probably don't. I want to read you a quote, what one of the city councilmen basically said about it. Her name is Carlina Rivera. She said, "It's time for our city to be that beacon for the country once again."
Beacon. Beacon of what? Light or death? I don't know.
I'm not interested in my hard-earned tax money. And even though I live in New Jersey, I pay New York taxes because I work in New York. I'm not interested in my tax money going towards this. If you're like me, vote them out.
You really need to. And we've said this before. The reason why the likes of Bill de Blasio get elected, no, it's not because people agree with him. Remember, this is all part of their coalition of power. They have the unions. The Democratic Party in New York City, they have the unions. They got the cops, they got the firemen, they got the teachers, they got all the public service workers. They got them all. That's why a communist like Bill de Blasio actually could be the mayor of New York City. They don't want him. They honestly can't say that they agree with him. And they turn their backs on him at when cops get shot, or did when I was living in Brooklyn. When I first met my wife, we were living in Brooklyn because she was there, and then I told her I want to move back to Jersey. When we were there, I was there for the funeral because it was right up our block when the two cops got shot. All right, I was there when the cops turned their back. How many of those cops that turned their back on Bill de Blasio when he showed up at that funeral, at that wake, how many of them voted for him? Because of your union contract. Do you want to pay for abortions? Just because you're so protective of your precious contract that you don't want to give up one nickel?
Even more
so, it's disgusting, Joe.
Out-of-state people to get abortions. It's one thing to pay for them for people in state. You're now paying for them for people in Ohio,
right?
For people in Alabama. You're paying for.
Look, as far as it goes, abortion is legal in some states, and thank God, abortion's not going to be legal in many states pretty soon. Okay, by the grace of God, and eventually, as a nation, we will get our heads out of our butts. We will raise our consciousness to understand that we're killing babies, and we can't allow for the destruction of human life inside the womb or outside the womb. Okay, so people are starting to wake up. But at the end of the day, if you're a girl in Ohio and Ohio has banned abortion, you want abortion, all right? Go to your mother who's allowing you to have the abortion and get the money from her. And take the bus to New York City or get in the back of the SUV and let her drive you to Queens to go get an abortion, and you pay for it. I'm not paying for it.
Also, just to let you know what Mr. Merrill Hoffman, who owns this place, Choices in Jamaica, Queens, in 2016, he had over 50,000 clients, and he had $10 million in revenue. So Mr. Hoffman's getting rich. By the way, and what he called people who were pro-lifers in America, he called them America's Taliban. He also called sidewalk counselors in front of his clinic. He said they're American terrorists.
Terrorists.
So this is what he says. So anyone who feels that way, I just want you to know it. Because a lot of times, because you know the mainstream media, both on the right and the left, aren't talking about it.
Right. Also, I never thought that Joe and Joe would be considered Taliban, but he said so, so I guess we are, right?
So.
Well, that's a new one, because we're irredeemable, we're deplorable, and now we're the Taliban.
But also, I want to remind you of what that bill in New York's all about. We talked about it on a few shows. I just want to give you three little gems. This was basically voted into law by Mr. Cuomo on the anniversary of Roe v. Wade on January 22nd, 2019. So let me just give you three gems of what this is all about. This is now in the law in New York State and New York City. 1, legalize abortion up to birth. That means if a child is born in an abortion, you can kill it. 2, non-doctors can perform abortion. Is this mic on? Oh, it is.
Yeah,
Non-doctors can perform abortion.
That means the
in New
butcher.
York.
The butcher. If he
Well,
says
they
I do
are
well, they are butchers. But the butcher who usually cuts meat. If he says, "Come on, you could come in. I do the abortion for you." It's okay. No health and safety standards.
Just
none
so
of that
you
stuff.
know, if you don't believe us, look it up.
Yeah,
And secondly,
look it
which
up.
is also very interesting, probably a lot of people don't know this, repealing the state's recognition of a preborn baby over 24 months as potential homicide
24 weeks.
24 weeks.
24
My bad.
weeks.
I'm sorry. My bad. What does that mean? That means if a woman is pregnant and say she's 6 months pregnant, she's 7 months pregnant, and her husband beats her up, before you could charge that man and kills her, you could charge that man with 2 murders.
Right.
Now you could only charge him with 1.
Right. Because
Is that pro-woman?
Because it's the not pro-woman. All right. And it certainly shows their inclination towards just wanting to provide death to people, because they are the culture of death. Okay. But that's always the fundamental thing, and we're going to talk about it in a little bit. In other words, it is the view of human life, their view of human life. Okay. And if the law recognizes a child in the womb, which it should recognize it from the moment of conception, we're never going to back away from that. We are abolitionists. Joe and I are abolitionists on abortion. Okay. I wish more people were, even some pro-life people. But nonetheless, okay, you then have to say that that is a human life. They will not give an inch, because they say, well, if it's a human life of 24 weeks, then it's a human life of 23 weeks and 22 weeks and 21 weeks, because logically, then you have to conclude that life begins at conception. They cannot concede, while that baby is residing inside that womb, that that baby is a human person, that that baby is a human being. That's why they do this, because that means that it would force an argument. And the argument is what they don't want to have. Again, they want to just consider it settled. So logically, there's only 2 logical conclusions to abortion. Okay, I hope the people that are consider themselves in the middle kind of get this through their head. You're either for abortion right up to the day before the baby is born, or you're for an abolition of abortion. Anywhere in the middle is arbitrary. Okay, if you think that it's a woman's right to choose, then that woman can choose anytime she wants, even up to the moment of birth. Okay, there was just one or the other, and it comes a time in America we're going to have to make a decision. Okay, because what's the difference if you said, well, I'm not for abortion after 24 weeks? What's the difference? 24 weeks and 1 day, and the law says it's a human being, but 24 weeks minus a day, then the baby's not a human. It's not consistent. It's not a consistent argument.
I don't actually think they care.
Oh, no, they don't. No. I didn't want to give you the impression that they care. The left doesn't care at all. Cuomo proved that.
Yeah.
With this atrocity of a law, Cuomo proved that by saying, no, right, and leaving aside everything, right up to the day before the baby's born. Just you kill that baby. All right, and like I said, Alphonse the butcher, he can do it for you if he wants.
Doesn't have to be a doctor.
Doesn't have to be a doctor.
You got to be out of. First of all, you got to be out of your mind.
Right.
If you're a woman, to allow someone to do that to your body if they're not a doctor.
Well, why
you
is
have to be out? They always talk about backroom abortions, and that's what that is.
That's what that is.
And it's legal
in
New York State.
How do you do that? How do you then justify if a woman goes to one of these butchers who's not a doctor, she gets butchered in the process, and she dies, and the baby dies? Who are you going to blame then? You're talking about a radically pro-abortion state.
It'll be radically,
all right. It'll be
never.
She went into the back alley. Yeah, but she did that in a state that allows abortion right up to the day before the baby's born,
without a doctor.
Without a doctor. Who are you going to blame for that? Go blame Andrew Cuomo. He's the one who championed the law. He's the one who signed it into law. He's the one who said, "God bless you," to all those people that were supporting the signing of that legislation. All right. So who are you going to blame then when that woman goes again to a butcher who's offering the abortion at a discounted rate? Say, well, I don't have the money, so and that's what they'll probably do. It's like, well, she went there because you people don't want to pay for her health care. They'll call it health care. That's why she went. So it's your fault that the woman died. No, that would be their argument. Well,
I'll tell you what. This is another deep state decision with your money. They're using your money that you pay every day. And I want to just bring it to the second city in the United States, which is another deep state decision. And this is at the university level, at the University of Chicago.
Yeah.
A gentleman was pursuing his PhD His name is Steve Jacobs, because names are important.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, the University of Chicago was suppressing his research that he was doing on abortion and gave him a hard time to get his PhD. Now, this is a gentleman, this is supposed to be a university, a very good university for that matter. Wouldn't you want solid research on something?
Let me hold you right there. Just to back up what you said about the University of Chicago, always has had a good reputation, okay? A little bit different than the rest, not falling into this necessarily an ideological lockstep, particularly on economics. Milton Friedman was there, Hayek was there. So they have the Chicago School. But according to an article by Josh Hammer, this was in the Daily Wire, okay? The so-called, quote-unquote, Chicago principles represent the academic gold standard for freedom of expression in the American Academy. In fact, I'm reading from the article, 3 years ago, the school even went so far as to mail a letter to all incoming freshmen to tell them that the school does not condone trigger warnings or safe spaces. Now, we say this to say, this is a school with a good reputation for academic freedom, okay? To say, we're not into this clampdown on freedom of speech and free expression. No, we're interested in, I would assume, dialogue and arriving at truth. Now, having said that, please, Joe, continue.
No, but it's just simply they're suppressing research. Research is research. And frankly, if it's true, you should accept it, because that means this is done and performed by a well-thought-out individual, and they're giving him a hard time.
They're giving him a hard time. Let's be clear, just to give the audience a background in what exactly it was he was trying to do. Okay, what he was trying to do, he was trying to get to biologists to do a scholarly survey of biologists worldwide to get their views on when human life begins. Now, why is that a threat to the establishment? And why did the University of Chicago and much of their faculty and their what do they call it, the review board that, let's say, you have to go in front of when you're presenting your dissertation committee, why did they give them such a hard time? This is a school that's known for academic freedom, but not on this issue. And all he was doing, not from a religious point of view, but from a biological point of view, he was trying to do a survey to determine what biologists were saying. And what he found was the vast majority of biologists will say that human life begins at fertilization. So when the egg is fertilized, that is a human being biologically. Now, what does that do? As we were saying earlier, that forces a conversation. And it's the conversation that they don't want to have. And let me tell you what these scholarly people, what their response was to him, because he got not only a lot of pushback from the University of Chicago and the faculty at the University of Chicago. Listen, these are scholars. This is what we're told, they're scholars.
Very good.
So I want to read you something. This was some of the responses he got to the survey emails that he was sending out to these biologists. This was some of the responses. These are scholars. These are scientists. Okay? Is this study funded by Trump or the Ku Klux Klan? That was their scholarly response. Here's another one. Sure hope you aren't an effing Christian. Okay? Here's another one. Our society should embrace science and not religion. We will be more kinder and accepting society. All people, not a Trumpian society, and of fascism and exclusion of immigrants. Diversity builds a nation. This is their mistake. And isolationism destroys it. What on earth does that have to do with this argument?
Nothing.
Nothing. I filled the survey, but I thought that many of the questions were highly manipulative. I believe it's a horribly manipulative survey, and its end is to support the religious, patriarchal abuse of women's rights that has gone on for way too long. Scholars, I want to outrage you a little bit more, if you'll indulge me, Joe
Sure.
Resinello. Please indulge me, okay? Because you'll love this stuff, because you're hearing it here at the Frontline with
nowhere
Joe and
else,
Joe.
by the
And
way.
nowhere else. Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Resinello, Sunday nights, 8 o'clock, in the breach, fighting the good fight and fighting for the truth. This is some stupid right to life thing. Yuck. I believe in a right to choice. That sounds like a scholarly response from a biologist asking about a biological view of when life begins.
Is yuck a scientific?
It might be nowadays.
I
well,
guess.
remember, I don't know, sooner
Yuck.
or later. All right. Here's another scientific word. That's really a crap survey. You have such major political issues in your country. Maybe you should focus on raising standards. I am ashamed of the University of Chicago to see such rubbish disseminated. And finally, I do not want to be involved in this blimpish evangelical rollback of social achievements. Also, I do not want to receive further emails from you. Okay. I did want to point out just on the last one, I'm not going to get to the yuck thing or the crap thing. All right. I do not want to be involved in this blimpish evangelical rollback of social achievements. My question to all you people out there, all you people that are living in la-la land when it comes to this, okay, you really believe it's a social achievement that we allow babies to be killed in the womb? Do you really look in the mirror and think yourself as such a progressive-minded person when you say that it's okay for babies to be killed in the womb? Do you? Do you really believe that? You need to raise your consciousness. You need to turn the light bulb on, okay? Because right now it's off. You are in a dark, dark place, our friends, okay? And we pray for you, whether you care about it or not. Joe and I pray for you, and many people do. You don't want to know why? Because you're in darkness. That this is progress to you. You know, the Romans did this too. They thought it was progress too. The difference is rather than kill the baby in the womb, they take the baby right after it was born and they put it under a bridge and let it die overnight. They called it exposition. Exposition is what we nowadays call abortion. It's the same thing. You people are dark and you need to turn on the light.
You know what I find interesting is these are the type of comments that Joe just read for people who they'd say who are, you know, involved in dogma or who are, say, evangelical or particularly Catholic. This is a very good school. And this man is a very serious individual. By the way, he did get his PhD.
Yeah, he eventually got his PhD.
At University of Chicago.
After 10 years and a lot of agita.
Okay, so the point is agita is a technical term in New Jersey.
Yeah. That's a scientific term.
It's sort of like yuck. It's sort of like yuck.
Yeah, right.
But anyway, what's it called? This is not a church. That you know, this is not a religious person, say an Orthodox Jew or a Catholic or an evangelical. This is a university, and those comments, frankly, have nothing to do with science. This man is talking about science.
Aren't they anti-intellectual, Joe?
Absolutely.
No, if you can't, this is what we talk about all the time. This is, and we'll kind of like segue into the end of our show this way, because I think this is one of the reasons why we're here. Okay, we call this a conversation. Now, we're going to get to a point where we're going to get many people who are going to want to have that conversation. It may be when we do a live show and we're able to, let's say, do call-ins or whatever the case may be. But right now, people can comment in. But many people out there, look, I saw, I think, one person in last week's, in the com box, okay, who disagreed with us on a number of things, who is asking intelligent questions, okay, legitimate questions in a respectful and civil way, trying to arrive at truth, wanting to know what a response would be. The rest of the people that disagreeing with us were basically no different than these people that were writing back to this Steve Jacobs.
Yeah.
In other words, it's yuck. One guy said we're a couple of effing idiots. Okay, that's not very productive. That doesn't further the conversation. Okay, we're just a couple of white guys. One guy called us a couple of babies or something along those lines. My point is that, and the reason why Joe and I are bringing this up, they don't want, when we say they, we mean the left. They don't want a conversation on anything. But one of the things I read in this article more than anything else, that's why Joe and I hammer on abortion all the time. That is the sacred cow. They do not want any scientist coming out and saying life begins at conception.
Especially from the University of Chicago.
Right, because that forces an argument. That forces a conversation. That forces a conversation. The way I read it was, many people believe or call themselves pro-choice because they've been taught to believe that life does not begin at conception. That's what they were taught in high school, in college. There are people that, let's say, of our generation or the generation before. This is what they were taught since the 1970s right up to this point. Ergo, they're pro-choice. They think it's a woman's right to choose. But what they found in the study also was the reverse occurs. Once people hear the evidence and are convinced on a biological level that life begins at conception, they then begin at the very least to question their pro-choice or pro-abortion views. And that's what the left, it's the same thing as black people voting 35% for Donald Trump. They can't have that, Joe Resinella. Well, that is their abortion is their sacred cow. And they've shown what they think of any sort of academic inquiry into this question of abortion and when life begins, okay? They've shown what they think about that. What they do is they call it yuck.
And I've said this. I said it last week, and I'll say it again. You're on the wrong side of history.
Right.
Trust me. Trust me. Trust me. Trust me on this. You are on the wrong side of history on this issue.
Can I make their brains explode?
Absolutely.
Can I make their brains explode?
Absolutely.
You're on the wrong side of God, and God exists. I don't care what the atheists say. I don't care what anybody says. Okay, God exists, and your life actually matters, and He actually cares. You are on the wrong. I don't really care if you're on the wrong side of history. You're on the wrong side of God, and you need to get on the right side.
And you cannot support this. You
cannot support
this.
it.
It's not a linear idea. If you say that you believe in a God, you cannot say that you are for abortion because it's murder. And science is proving it.
Right.
This is just one example, actually, of many examples.
Right.
Science is proving the argument. So we have to get it right with this.
That's right.
As a country.
Yeah.
We have to get right with this.
Mother Teresa said famously, "The world." I'm not quoting. I'm paraphrasing. The world will never be at peace as long as abortion is legal. And I think she's absolutely right. She was absolutely right. I can't sit down with anybody. They could call me all the names they want. They could call you all the names they want. I can't sit down with anybody like we talked about the morality or immorality. I said it before. I'm going to say it again. Don't give me a moral argument about the border. Don't give me a moral argument about anything. If you cannot recognize the sanctity of human life and that life begins at conception and that life is deserving and deserving of their constitutional rights, the right to have their life protected, okay? Don't talk to me about Mexicans coming across the border. You have no moral basis. Don't talk to me about the environment. You have no moral basis. You care more about trees than you do about people. I can't talk to you because you're inconsistent. On the one hand, you say you care about people, and as Joe pointed out a long time ago on one of our first programs, the poorest among us are the babies in the womb. They are the most dependent human beings there are. That means they're poor. Okay? And if you can't care about them, please don't preach to me to care about homeless people. We'll care about homeless people because we do. But we're not going to listen to your argument about it because you have no moral basis. You have no moral standing.
And again, we said this, and also politicians, particularly an old governor of Casey in
Pennsylvania,
who was probably the last Democrat. This is not the Democratic Party of your grandfather.
It's not.
This is not, and this is where I think the next group of people have to leave this party. People who historically just pulled the ballot. There's tons of them. You know, they just said, oh, my whole family, we've always been Democrats. We come from Jersey City. We come from Newark. We were this. We come from the mines.
We voted for Peter Rodino back in 1975.
This is not the party of that like segment of society,
right.
Like, you know, your grandfather. It's not. It's a radicalized group of people, and frankly, they're un-American.
Yeah.
They are un-American, and they're mainstreaming an anti-American theme. And I want nothing to do with it.
I'm with you, brother.
Zero.
Nothing.
Well, that was the front line, my friends.
Well, I think that was a good conversation to have. You know, we have to keep hammering on these things, like you said, the ones that are, let's say, they might get some play in the media, and they're going to say that it's nobody. But nonetheless, it's not being widely talked about. And as we said, you know, because of you and by the grace of God, last week's show, 5,600 views. 5,600 views shared over 30 times. We had 75 comments. We're already up to 50 comments tonight. You want to know why? You cannot defeat the truth. You can't. Okay, and that's what the left is learning with great difficulty.
And it resonates in the hearts of all people,
that's right.
Whether you're on the right or the left. And
right.
Frankly, that's why we do this show.
Right.
We're here to awaken people to the truth. This is not a political show. This is a show about the truth. We stand for the truth, and so should you. That's right.
So next week, Sunday, as always, 8 p.m. Okay, we're gonna provide you with another good conversation. We'll get the comm box working so we can make sure we keep track of more of your comments. Artie, if you're still watching, I'll straighten out the rest of the books during the week. Okay, this will all be straightened out. You're like my wife, all right? But we want to thank you for joining us. We want to thank Joe Campo for always being behind us. from Brooklyn, all the people that are staying with us, all the people that have joined us over from YouTube and from HolyFaith Media, Jonathan Ross, our main man, Jonathan Ross, helping us out, spreading the word, spreading the truth. But remember that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation, that's going on everywhere.
We'll see you next week, guys. Thanks for listening in.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.